Hello everybody, I'm Richard Gon of Work to Live podcast version, and this time what I'd like to talk about is, as title shows, whether ethnicity is important or not. The title says, is ethnicity is important, which is the title. Is ethnicity important? About which I'd like to tell you some stories. And first of all, and maybe if you have frequent listeners, you understand me, or which means you understand that I'm a Japanese person living in Japan. So in which sense, maybe most listeners live in the United States of America, and some listeners live, or fairly many listeners live in East Europe, not East European countries, but West European developed countries. So let me tell you again. So most of the listeners live in most of the listeners of my podcast live in the United States of America, and other list, as, and some people, or many people, not as large as the number of the number of American people, but some numbers of people live in the developed countries, in Europe. Anyway, so describing the demography of my listeners, the discrepancy, or the, the degree of this is the degree of being dispersed is stuff like that. I'm sorry for my bad explanation. I couldn't come up with suitable words for explaining the diversity of my listeners. Anyway, so the importance of ethnicity. So to start with, whether it's important or not is up to its people. For example, what I mean is, for example, actually, so some Japanese American people think ethnicity is important. So if you are Japanese American, you can understand. But so for Japanese people living in Japan, ethnic connection or tribal connectivities are not so important, because in this country we are the majority people. So I use my own Japanese name when I not when I use when I live on, when I outside, or even when I inside my own house, I use my Japanese name, or in daily lives, I use my own Japanese name, and which is why I'm categorized into Japanese people. So there are, for example, there are, in the case of Japanese people, there are Japanese American people, Japanese Canadians, and in which sense, Japanese people are, maybe in your countries, Japanese people are minority people, like so which means maybe Japanese people have some kind of strong relationships, or some kind of strong connections derived from, or stemming from the same as being the same ethnicity, or being the tribe connectivity, stemming from tribe connectivity, stuff like that. But such, so for Japanese people outside of this country, the ethnicity is important. So for Japanese people living in outside of this country, the ethnicity plays a big role for those Japanese people living in outside the Japanese islands. And why I'm telling you is because in the case of my country, there are some minority groups. So among those minority groups, the largest is Korean people. So Korea is so why I'm telling you, why I thought you can get engaged into my episode is because one of the among those minority groups in my country, one of the largest is Chinese and Korean. So as you know, so I'm recording this episode on February in 2022, and maybe in this year, BTS はバンタンソニョン団 is really popular. Let me let me let me check my pronunciation again. Bang Tang Sonyeon Tang. I'm sorry for my checking my pronunciation. Pantang Sunyondan is really difficult for me to pronounce because I can. It's tough for me to distinguish each pronunciation, each Korean pronunciation. But actually, maybe BTS is famous even in your country, and BTS is the members of BTS are from Korea, or at least those all the members are South Korean people. Anyway, so South Korean people have really a strong connections stemming from ethnicity, or they find, or Korean people find ethnicity really important. That is that is because that is because of history. So maybe Empire Japan has some kind of responsibility because maybe if you are frequent listeners, you can understand. You know that not much. So in the beginning of the 20th century, Empire Japan had conquered Korean Peninsula, and Korean Peninsula had been one of the colonies of Empire Japan. And I don't know what kind of events made the entire made not the entire made the ethnicity important in among Korean people, but actually, so the fact in this present time is that Korean people are dispersed. I don't know whether you can understand with my explanation. So there are many Korean communities or Korean regions, not all over the world, in Asian countries. I'm sorry for my bad describing ability. I'm sorry for my bad description, but for example, I will tell you examples. For example, there were some Korean communities in my country, and that is natural because but that is natural because almost 100 years ago, the peninsula had been a colony of my country, which is why some Korean immigrants came into our country. Maybe such a massive immigration happened maybe decades before, or after the colonization of Korean Peninsula, which had been done by Empire Japan before the loss of World War II. So, but not only Japan, but also Russia, and Russia has some communities of Korean people, and China has, of course, Korea, China has communities of Korean people. So, which means, for example, in the case of China, there is a region. So let me remember the name of the Korean communities. Not that is not communities. Yeah. One of them. There are two largest communities, and one is yeah, Yanbian is the largest, and the second largest is Chanbai. Chanbai is the second largest. Yanbian is the largest community of Korean people in mainland China, and the second largest is Chanbai, which is the name of a community, or which is the name of a region where many Korean people live in. So in this case, I have some acquaintances of Korean people who are from mainland China, and they speak both language, meaning which means they speak Chinese language and Korean language. So how I could communicate with them is by using Japanese language. There are some Korean Chinese people who can speak Japanese language, and some Korean Japanese people come to this country, which is why I can communicate with them using Japanese language, because I can use Japanese language, and that's because that's my mother tongue. And not only mainland China, but also Russia has some communities of Korean people. I don't know the name of any of those communities, but actually there there are many some Korean people live in Russia. Of course, Japanese people are dispersed, or there are many. So apart from this country, apart from this insular nation, there are many Japanese people living in other countries than this country. But so what I want you to know is that to to the to the extent to which people create some kind of communities or some kind of region governing by themselves. Maybe Japanese people do not have such influence because many Japanese people have adapted into the local people or the local community. For example, in the case of I don't know much about the United States of America, or I don't know much about Japanese people in the United States of America. So maybe there are some Japanese towns, but talking about or focusing on the lives of Japanese people, maybe Japanese Americans and Japanese Canadians have adapted into the societies of the United States of America and Canada, which is why they live in those countries as Americans or as Canadians, which is a situation of my race or of my ethnicity or of my ancestry, which is why maybe that might be because not only that is I don't think that is a sole reason, but this country has this country has fairly developed, and this country is a country accepting many immigrants. So if you say so, South Korea is a side accepting many immigrants, but actually South Korea has been a colony of my country, which is why that might be a reason. That might be one of the reasons why Korean people find ethnicity really important. So taking some. I don't know much about Western European countries, but this is what I have heard that German people find ethnicity important because there are many not Japanese people but German people. There are many German people living in other countries than Germany. For example, in the case of Russia, yeah. For example, there are many people having German ancestries and German ethnicities living in Russia, and there was an era. There was an era when those German people living in Russia had been segregated by Russian people or the local Russian people. Such a situation, or so the answer to that question shown on title, the question is ethnicity important? So maybe some people who had experienced tough some some people who had tough experiences find such racial or ethnic ethnic relations really important, which is what I'd like you to know this time. So I will tell you again. So in the case of Korean people and in the case of German people, they have experienced really tough situations or really difficult events, which is why maybe they came to find connections or relations stemming from ethnicities really important, which is what I'd like you to know this time. So maybe most of you are Anglo-Saxon people, which is my understanding, but I don't know what kind of ancestries or what kind of ethnicities you have. At last, so this is not a correction, but I said there are some regions for Korean people in mainland China, and I mean the regions I'm talking about are the two regions I was explaining in this episode, and I said Yambian and Chambai, which are Chinese languages. So using Korean languages for calling those regions are Yongbyon and Chambe, respectively. So there are Chinese characters explaining or naming those two major regions for Korean people in mainland China, and one of which is Yanbian. Yanbian is Chinese language, but using Korean language, those Chinese characters are read Yongbyon. And the other one, which is Chambai in Chinese language, but using Korean language, those Chinese characters are read Chambe. Please make sure at this point. So that's it. Thank you very much for your listening. See you.